did you know the average human mind generates around 50,000 thoughts per day? That's like trying to meditate in the middle of Times Square during rush hour.
Well, that explains why sitting still for even 5 minutes feels like an Olympic sport sometimes.
You know what's fascinating is that neuroscience shows this constant mental chatter isn't actually a problem. It's just our brain doing its job. The real challenge is our relationship with these thoughts.
That's such an interesting perspective. How do we start shifting that relationship, though?
Well, think of it like watching traffic from a skyscraper. The cars, our thoughts, are still moving below, but we're not stuck in the gridlock anymore. And this is where the science gets really interesting. Studies show that labeling our thoughts actually reduces activity in the amygdala, our brain's stress center.
Oh, that's exactly why the labeling technique feels so powerful. Instead of getting tangled up in every thought, we're just saying, "Oh, there goes another worry thought," or planning thought.
Right. And what's even more fascinating is that MRI studies have shown meditation literally changes our brain structure. We're talking about increased gray matter density in areas controlling attention and emotional regulation.
So you're telling me we can actually rewire our brains just by observing our thoughts? That's pretty mind-blowing.
And here's where it gets really practical. Instead of trying to force our minds into silence, which, let's face it, is like trying to calm a caffeinated squirrel, we can use 3 science-backed techniques that work with our brain's natural tendencies.
Let me guess. Breath anchoring is one of them? I've heard that's like the meditation equivalent of training wheels.
Well, more like the meditation equivalent of gravity. It's always there, always available. When you focus on the sensation of breathing, you're activating your parasympathetic nervous system, which naturally calms that fight-or-flight response.
That makes so much sense. What about the other techniques?
So the second is that thought labeling we mentioned earlier. Research from UCLA showed it's particularly effective because it engages the prefrontal cortex, basically putting your rational brain in the driver's seat instead of your emotional brain.
And I'm guessing the third technique has something to do with guided meditations?
Exactly. Studies show that beginners who use guided meditations stick with the practice 40% longer than those who try to go it alone. It's like having a personal trainer for your mind.
You know what's really interesting about all this? It completely challenges the popular notion that meditation is about achieving some perfect state of mental silence.
Right. And get this, even experienced meditators' minds wander just as much as beginners. The only difference is they've learned not to beat themselves up about it. It's like training a puppy. You wouldn't yell at it for getting distracted, you just gently guide it back.
That's such a relief to hear. So many people think they're failing at meditation when their mind wanders.
And here's the kicker. Every time you notice your mind has wandered and bring it back, that's like doing a mental push-up. You're literally strengthening your attention muscles.
Speaking of attention, with all our digital distractions today, this seems more important than ever.
Absolutely crucial. Recent studies show our attention spans have decreased by about 25% in just the last few years. Meditation isn't just a nice-to-have anymore. It's becoming an essential skill for mental fitness.
That really puts things in perspective. Any final thoughts for our listeners who might be feeling both inspired and intimidated?
Remember this. Meditation isn't about stopping the waves of thought. It's about learning to surf them. And just like surfing, it's not about being perfect. It's about showing up and practicing, one breath at a time.
Well, that's definitely changed how I'll approach my next meditation attempt.
And that's our show for today on Gen FM, where we turn brain science into practical wisdom. Keep breathing, keep noticing, and remember, even a wandering mind is a mind that's learning to meditate.